What is up? You were watching the 5th episode of the LaxFactor Lacrosse Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you're buzzed when we put out new videos. Not that kind of buzzed. I'm talking like buzzed in your pocket with your phone. Get your head out of the gutter. One thing that's been on my mind is the dive. I was really excited when I had heard that they were bringing the dive back, and then I was a little bit disheartened as it started coming out, the full breadth of how they're going to call this. And they're working in a weird section, the imaginary section nonetheless, making it even more difficult for officials to call out front of the goal that kind of makes sure that the player doesn't dive towards the goal mouth. And if you end up in this area at the end of your shot, they're going to determine that you were diving towards the goal mouth, and that's geared towards protecting the goalies. The problem is the whole idea with implementing the shot clock was to take a judgment call out of the officials' hands, and they do that. And I think they got the shot clock rule right for the most part. At least we'll see, but I like what they implemented. With the dive, now they've simplified the shot clock part and just greatly complicated this whole dive thing. I think that it could have just been kept simpler, at least for a year or two. No contact with the goalie, no contact with the goalie's lower half, and then let the refs call it from there. Now we're adding in imaginary lines. And then I hear some people talking about maybe they need to put the lines on the field. It's just way too complex. I'm still glad it's there, so I'm not going to whine about that. It's going to make the game a little bit more exciting. It's going to help alleviate a little bit of the shot clock slowdown that we'll see. Teams that'll zone it up will have to account for a guy at X because of the shot clock or because of the dive rule. So there's all sorts of good things that are still going to come of this dive. I just feel like if the goal is to take a little bit off of the plates of the officials, because they're already having to keep up with an ever-changing sport, a sport that's speeding up. There's greater and greater athletes playing every year. So keeping things simplified for the officials, making in-game calls easier, should always be a priority. And I think with this, they greatly overcomplicated something that didn't need to be. I think that I know the spirit is to try to make sure that goalies don't get hurt. My fear is just that it's going to make the officials' job a hell of a lot harder than it already was. US Lacrosse put out their way too early top 25. I don't think it's way too early. I think it's completely appropriate to put it out at this time. As I look at it, Virginia at number 5, I think that's accurate. When you look at Virginia offensively, they've got Conrad coming back from his injury. They've got Dox Aiken at midfield as a junior. He's a beast. They have Ian Laviano at attack, sophomore. He's an excellent finisher and complements the man, Michael Kraus, junior at attack, amazingly well. So UVA deserves this ranking. They're a solid team across the board, but offensively they are going to be scary and insanely hard to stop. And then we jump to number 4, Cornell. Cornell's one of my favorites coming into this season to win it all. And I base that opinion after I watched the Yale Cornell tape from the Ivy League finals. It was just the job that Cornell's defense did. It was incredible team defense that they played. They were on almost every slide. Ben Reeves torched them, but they shut almost the entire Yale offense beyond Reeves down, only giving up 3 goals to a player not named Ben Reeves. I believe they gave up 8 in that game. So after seeing the way their defense played and then seeing what they have coming back offensively, they are going to be a scary team coming out of the Ivy League. So I like that ranking of 4, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them, pop up into the 3-2-1 spot, because they'll win a bunch of games early, and I think that'll help their ranking. And then depending on how Yale puts it together and Duke, a couple of teams who have lost big cats, where Duke losing Gutterding and Yale losing Reeves. It'll be interesting to see how the early season goes for those teams, and then you have teams like Cornell and Virginia who come back fully loaded. I think that you'll see kind of a flip-flop of that top 5. Moving on, though, from 4, Maryland at 3. Maryland locks and loads every year. They got Bernhardt rocking the number 1 jersey, and he's fully deserving. They got Bubba getting ready to rock also. So Maryland is going to be really tough for everybody to contend with. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see them playing on Memorial Day weekend. More specifically, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them playing on Monday also. So Maryland, I think they got that right as well. I almost would have given Maryland my number 2 over Duke, simply because while Maryland loses a Connor Kelly, Duke loses a Gutterding, and I'm just not sure that those two things are equal. I think that Maryland is a little bit more locked and loaded than Duke is on their side. And then you got Duke, and they, like everybody else, like the Marylands of the world, they didn't even have to reload necessarily, but just guys that they have coming back. Brad Smith, you have Manown, you have Lowry, you have Robertson, all coming back. So that offense is going to reel a little bit, losing Gutterding, and I think they'll struggle a little bit early as they just try to figure out who's going to become the man, because someone has to step up a little bit more than everybody else. So as they figure that out, they might drop one early like they tend to do, but the reality is that they have firepower all over the place. They got guys who can dodge. They have guys that can light it up from outside. So that's the perfect combination. Guys like Smith, you don't want to ever let him get his hands free. So Duke sitting pretty at number 2. I'd agree with that pick. And then you have Yale at number 1. And I had originally crapped a little bit on Yale, thinking that maybe Cornell was going to have a really, really good shot at upending them in the Ivy. It's not that Cornell doesn't. It's just that the more I watched Yale, the more I realized that they grew around Ben Reeves last year. Reeves was that team, but it was a team that by the season's end, a lot of the amazing things that you saw Reeves do in terms of putting points up through the playoffs, he was benefiting from the players supporting him the way that a supporting cast is supposed to. Guys like Jackson Morrill running the 2-man game at X with him. Guys like Jack Ty getting runs out top. Gaudette just being a sniper from the crease area when needed. So the more I watched Yale, the more I realized they're not going to fall off that badly. I don't think they're going to hold that number 1 ranking all year. And I think like Duke, they'll struggle a little bit in the beginning of the year as they try to find that identity. But let's not pretend like Jackson Morrill isn't the man. They've got a couple of really good recruits coming in. They've got guys like Jack Ty and Morrill to play off each other with Gaudette as a finisher in the crease. They are going to be fine. And I don't think they'll drop out of the top 5 to top 7 throughout the year. And I think come playoff time, they have as good of a shot as any at ending up playing on Monday. The Olympics, we keep talking about the Olympics, and I'm excited about the Olympics. I'm glad for the sport of lacrosse that it's going to be in the Olympics. What I'm not glad about is the more I hear about how this is all supposed to go down, the more I'm just worried about what the product's going to look like at the end of the day. One of the things I heard the other day was that the men and the women are going to have to play by the same rules. I don't think that really affects the men completely. I assume that just means they're going to make the women strap the pads on, which I don't think that the women are going to have a problem with that to a degree as long as they get to play in the Olympics. The other thing was they're trying to decrease the field sizes and decrease roster sizes. So when you start to look at all this, to me, it sounds like they really need to play some sort of variation of the box game instead of trying to really water down and sissify the field game. Maybe it wouldn't be sissifying the field game, but I suspect if they're trying to find a happy medium between the men and the women's rules and things like that, it might involve a little bit of sissifying the game for the sake of the Olympics. I think if we're going with smaller field sizes, we're going to go with rules that both the men and women have to abide by, and then we're also going to have smaller rosters. It sounds like the box game would be perfect. You could end up with anywhere from 12 to 15-man rosters. You could play 5 on a field the size of a box field without the boards. I suspect they're not going to want to, use boards, so it would be some kind of rules around that where there's not boards, but they're going to play similar rules throughout. And I think that gives us the best chance to get a product that looks familiar to us, to get a product that is palatable to us, and a product that will sell, more importantly. Now, I know that that's not necessarily going to be a popular opinion, because I know there's a lot of guys that are going to be a part of this that don't want to think negatively about it at all, but I'm not. I'm going to be the guy that has to watch it and see what this product looks like at the end of the day from, my couch. Or, for people who are lucky enough to go watch it. But either way, the fans are the ones that have to watch the game. So while I'm cool and I'm glad and whatever happens, I'm not going to be all, completely excited about watching it if what ends up getting put on the field doesn't resemble what we've come to love between field lacrosse and box lacrosse. Another podcast that I'm excited to see pop up that I think you guys should be listening to, the Lacrosse Podcast. They started about the same time that we did, and they do a great job. So far, they've just been covering NLL, and I'm not a huge NLL guy, although I do have a subscription now, and I have been watching it a little bit. So I've been listening to them every week so far. I'm through the first 4 episodes of theirs. I think you guys should be giving them a listen also. So head on over. I believe it's Lacrosse All Stars, but either way, if you just search in YouTube, the Lacrosse Podcast, you're going to see them. You got 2 funny looking dudes, bearded dudes, and they're rocking out of the wood shop.